Now, with the cost of fuel on an upward trend, at least for the past 3 months, I mean from 144 to 150, now we are at 159 for a litre of super petrol, with the ongoing conversation that next month when April reviews prices, we might just be seeing that going up. Are we getting at a point whereby we need to explore new forms or other sources of energy with this, again, the high cost of living? This is what we're set to interrogate at this hour with my guest, that is Engineer Paul Simiyu, who is the Director of Sentimental Energy Limited. Karibu sana to the program, Engineer.
Thank you so much, Doreen.
All right, let us just broach this conversation from where things got thick, or as I would say, probably where the rain started betting us. I mean, as I said, we moved from 144 to 150. Now we are at 159 in terms of a litre of super petrol. And as at that time, around April, we had so much that was being said. We had the issue of oil marketers hoarding fuel. We had the issue of panic buying. We had the issue of the Russia-Ukraine war. I mean, there was a lot that was really given in terms of reasons as to why we were really experiencing the high cost of fuel. In your own analysis, Engineer, what would you say, has got us to this point?
Doreen, I think the sad reality is indeed there are a lot of international forces that have played a big role in influencing the local cost of electricity and specifically energy, on which oil or petroleum products and specifically diesel is part and parcel of the component for production. We've witnessed recently the Russian-Ukraine war invasion. Which is still ongoing on, and we don't know when it's going to stop. We have witnessed the changes in production as a result of tension between different countries and all that. But all ourselves internally, we have talked about a change in policy that goes back way in 2018, when the government or the president signed the Energy Act 2019 into a law that has been part of the lobby and discussions from 2004. And with that also came with the changes in the review of pricing of our petroleum products and also the processing of tendering and distribution and purchase of the diesel and petroleum products for this country. And all that, of course, coupled up with the high cost of taxation. We are where we are because of that. Yeah, sure.
In fact, around that same year, we had, members of the National Assembly passing the VAT on fuel, and we'll come to that in a bit. But again, just as you're talking about the reasons as to where we are in terms of the high cost of fuel, I mean, a Kenyan would argue we have the Petroleum Development Levy, whereby for every litre of petrol that you purchase, there's an amount that goes to this levy which is supposed to cushion you at the end of the day. So if that is the case, then again, why are we experiencing high prices if I have what needs to protect me from the high prices at the end of the day?
Sincerely speaking, the petroleum, I mean, the act that allows for that subsidy, which is basically a portion of what we pay at the pump, that's taken back for support as a way of subsidy and cushioning the first increment of the petroleum products, has been shrouded in a lot of secrecy. When it's probably properly implemented, we're supposed to be having a stabilized cost of fuel in the country. We're supposed to have better pump prices. We're supposed to have even an entry through the main lobby. If at all the market forces don't allow, we have a national oil, which is the market player in the government that is supported by staff, to be probably the anger marketer that can be able to stabilize the prices and all that. But no one really knows how that particular fund works. At the end of the day, we have seen very little benefits. And when the benefits come around, they also come with the production or the presentation of the figures as presented by the EPRA. People we cannot be able to audit, and therefore it's very, very difficult to see how effective that subsidy is working. We are actually probably at the mercy of the government policies and the government machineries, which we cannot be able to properly audit. And that particular lack of proper audit has left the country kind of a little bit exposed, especially towards the benefit of the petroleum fund levy, which is part and parcel of the subsidy program that's supposed to help and stabilize the products. You recently saw about it that even through the entire process, you realize apart from that probably around 45% of the cost of the petrol products per litre at the pump goes towards taxes. So we really don't know what we are probably doing around that.
So it means that perhaps there needs to be some form of more openness to understand how this works, because I mean, it could be difficult to reconcile the fact that I'm always paying for this and there's an amount that always goes to protect and cushion me, but it sort of like doesn't. So there needs to be some form of openness, even from the state, to just understand how all this works.
We need openness, we need audits, we need evaluations, we need a review, we need probably participation of neutral colleagues or participants who can be able to properly even enhance and evaluate this, because the same values have probably been added or been implemented elsewhere, and you can be able to see probably there's some countries that are enjoying better fuel prices. And for us, which have a protection in terms of the levy fund, we still are having among the highest prices in the region, more than even probably some countries that
more
don't
than
have
Uganda?
Until of late, yes, we have been having higher
Uganda
prices.
looks to be having quite, you know, their prices are slightly higher than us.
Uganda is getting higher, even Tanzania is slightly higher, and this one probably has come because of purely from the international forces, which is coming from the Ukraine, Russia. But before that, they've been having a lower price before.
All right, makes a lot of sense. Now, even as talk about the subsidy, I mean, just recently the CS Energy, Monica Juma, said that so far with this, in this financial year, they've at least used 67 billion in terms of, you know, the fuel subsidy, and their anticipation is that by the time we end this financial year, by 30th of June, which actually ends in the next 3 days, they're estimated to perhaps would have used a total of around 84 thereabout in terms of fuel subsidy. Just recently, we had the members of the National Assembly were against the 5 billion that had been slated in the Treasury to cater for fuel subsidy the next financial year, and they wanted to increase that to at least by 15 billion. But at least a reprieve for Kenyans, because in the new assented law, the president allocated 49 billion in terms of the fuel subsidy. But even at that, engineer, there's still a lot of conversation surrounding it is time to end fuel subsidy altogether. If that happens to be the case, what will become of you and I? Again, knowing that fully right now, the cost of living, which is also as a result of high cost of fuel prices, is what you're currently grappling and dealing with as a country.
Well,
quite a mouthful.
We are the times are quite uncertain.
Yeah.
The actions or decisions taken by the people in power, the people in positions of responsibility to caution Kenyans are not getting there in good time. Probably they're not getting to be enough. They are not probably the right decisions, because as you mentioned, yes, we have probably a selection of 49 billion signed by the president
for the next financial year.
Next financial year, but we also have very credible communication that the subsidy is going to be scrapped off, and we're going to leave the cost of energy, specifically petroleum products, at the mercy of the value of the market forces. At the same time, we have a program that allows for bulk purchase by different oil marketers through the tendering process, and offloading the same through reselling. I think what we'll be able to see is that we're going to see a little bit of more difficult times for the Kenyans. We're going to see more aggravated cost of living as a result of direct cost of energy, and I think the country, or the people, the rest of the people who are actually into the production and management of the country affairs, should be able to look at alternative means of energy to try and see whether there is a way of exploring independence of the energy products to try and caution themselves against inflation, hyperinflation, and even erraticity in terms of cost of energy.
You know, that message that we should brace ourselves for tougher times, not a good message, but in essence, it is the reality. And you're saying that it's time for us to explore other forms of energy, and we are getting to that in a bit. But again, also let me pick your mind on the taxes that are imposed on fuel just as a commodity. I mean, there's about, is it 9? If my memory serves me correct. And just recently, as we talked about in 2018, when the parliamentarians passed the 8% VAT on fuel commodity, that even increased, you know, the kind of taxes that are imposed in fuel as a commodity. We have the excise duty, the VAT itself, road maintenance levy. I mean, there's just quite a number of them. So if perhaps this is reduced, or the number of taxes are reduced to perhaps, let's say, maybe 3 or something, or 4 of the sort, might this at least get us in a good place in terms of the prices that we keep experiencing at the pump month in, month out?
That's definitely something to go with it, because as I mentioned, out of currently, for example, the cost of a litre of petrol at 160 shillings or 159, 62 shillings goes towards taxation.
Imagine.
Right? A direct cost of that, if you did away with 16%, probably going to reduce the taxation to around 35 or 36 shillings. That means we are reprieved by around 15 shillings, and that definitely brings the cost of the same products down by the same margin. And on we go. We're having double taxation. We have a road maintenance levy that comes with it, and we still have VAT, we still have other taxes that are in. So the whole conundrum of taxation is we are levying replicated, I think, revenue generation from the same product, which are supposed not to be. If we streamline that sector in such a way that we have minimum tax allocation on the product and the petroleum products, but also straight line, or basically make the procurement process of our petroleum products more straightforward. And more important, maybe it's the time we started exploring our own refining of our own products. We have oil, we have crude oil stored in Mombasa. We have a dead refinery that, if probably instead of putting in 49, 50, 100 billion in terms of fuel subsidies, why don't we invest that money in our own refinery and probably produce our own units around here and be able to consume our own products, and maybe we can be able to see a difference in the cost of energy and cost of petroleum products up in the country.
Well said. Or then why also that don't we look at different forms of energy, like the renewable energy?
That's part and parcel of the same. If you start producing and consuming what is your own, right from the petroleum products all the way to other sources of energy, hydro, geothermal, solar, we stand a chance of reducing over-dependence. Of course, when you talk about fuel and petroleum products, we are looking more into the mobility sector. Of course, we are hearing discussions about changing and entry of electrical vehicles. It's very possible to run our mobility sector, which consumes the highest cost of petroleum products in terms of consumption, towards solar and other renewable energy products. In terms of industrial production, we can be able to self-generate our own electricity from the rooftops or our yards of our area through solar. In terms of running our hospitals or malls, we can be able to basically subsidize, if not eliminate, the over-dependence of grid power, which part of it comes as a result of a fuel component from the grid towards self-production, as a result of using our rooftops, as a result of using our open spaces in our factories and areas of production towards producing our own electricity, which goes towards our own energy independence, which goes towards our own cost of reduction in our production activities, and maybe getting a better return in terms of our products and our services, and probably reduce cost of living.
Makes a lot of sense. Now let's come to the renewable energy, and as it turns out, you know, the world was aiming to achieve this, what they call the universal energy, by 2030. Kenya was aiming to do that actually by this year, 2022. So I want you to just talk to us about how practical that is, given the fact that we're already in this year as a country. And when you talk about universal energy, what exactly are we talking about?
Well, Doreen, universal energy is about energy access to everyone, to basically meet the quality of life and living standards that come as a result of having a good, affordable source of energy to carry out production, to carry out the residential living, to carry out operations of, let's say, health centers, schools, hospitals, industry areas, and all that. It's a case where everyone needs to have access to electricity throughout. And as Kenya, you know, we are standing at around 78% electrification countrywide. We are remaining with around 13%, and part of it is actually somewhere having in geographical areas where grid access is a problem because of
so at least we are somewhere there.
We are somewhere there.
Okay.
And with the current program of COSAP is a program that's funded by World Bank that allows for electrification of electrified counties, targeting 14 counties. And the program under that is being run on solar. We're going to do solar programs across schools, hospitals, police stations, borehole pumping across those 14 counties, called the marginalized Turkana, Traveta, Narok, Mombasa, and some areas. We'll be able to probably bring this particular facility to 100%. Tenders have been out from last year. Designs have already been approved, and I think the evaluation process of contractors is running under KPLC. And by the time they're released, we should be able to have attained that particular solution, maybe by the end of next year.
So clearly, from what I'm getting from you is that this is practical.
In Kenya, it's practical. Other countries have achieved it. In Africa, Kenya has made actually tremendous steps, and achieving 76% electrification across the country is something we can be able to commend the government on, especially more than 50% of it has having come for the last, let's say, 7 years. and getting to 100%, especially by, again, recognizing that grid power cannot get infrastructured in every corner of the country, but tapping into the alternative source, which is basically solar, which is going to complete the remaining 13% to 100%, is very much commendable.
Makes sense. Now, speaking of solar engineer, I mean, just from the basic understanding of what renewable energy is, of course, this is from energy from a source that cannot be depleted. And, you know, we have various forms of that. There's the hydro, biomass, solar. But anytime we talk about renewable energy, there's just a key focus on solar. What makes solar so peculiar amongst the rest?
I think it's because of the simplicity part of it.
Okay.
As you rightly pointed out, renewable is not basically solar. Hydro is part of renewable energy. Geothermal is part of renewable energy. Biomass, even nuclear electricity, and you know we are exploring all that way. But all of this wind power, all these other renewable forms of energy require massive infrastructure investment, transmission, distribution, support part of it from the point of generation to the point of consumption. When it comes to solar, you produce and consume from your point source. If this institution wanted to run on solar, basically what it requires to offer the roof or the yard where you have a parking lot, put there a couple of panels.
And it's easily accessible.
It's easy, you run it up, that's one. It's everywhere. You have solar here, you have solar in Mombasa, you have solar everywhere. The sun rises and sets up in Kenya from, you know, every day. And every other point where you're within the tropics, within the geographical region of the country, you can be able to generate your own source, your own electricity from solar. And that's because of that availability, because of that cost, which is slightly cheaper in terms of affordability from a cost of energy perspective, in terms of that reliability, and in terms of that, let's say, modulity, where you can do one unit, you can do 100 pieces that can be able to, depending on your need for electricity, you can be able to deploy it up, and makes it much more affordable, much more convenient compared to other forms of forms of renewable energy.
Okay, now that makes sense, because I was wondering, with all the forms that are in existence when it comes to renewable energy, why do we keep just talking about solar so much so? But it's because, as you said, it's easily available, easily accessible. Now, but even at that, as you talk about the uptake of this form of energy as a form of renewable energy, you know, some would say that it's quite expensive in terms of cost, particularly on the installation. In your own experience, talk to us about the cost implication of this form of energy.
Well, Doreen, I think in terms of evaluating the cost of solar, to be specific, we need to look at it from a cost of ownership point of view. Okay. In the sense that, yes, purchasing of upfront equipment is sometimes slightly expensive, but that has also been basically been reduced from as high as, let's say, you know, we rate solar in terms of watts or kilowatt peak. Kilowatt is the form of standard form of energy unit, and therefore we sell, or solar modules are bought in terms of unit per kilowatt peak. We have brought down that cost from 10 years ago, that was about 180 shillings per watt peak, to about right now 35 shillings per watt peak. That's about 65% power drop. But also, when you look at the cost of that unit, the units come with a lifetime performance of 25 years guaranteed, and over 40 years in terms of lifespan. And within that 25 or 40 years, which is power guaranteed, you're going to have electricity generated from this unit non-stop. So when you extrapolate, or we analyze that cost of right now purchasing a solar unit at 35 shillings per watt, and extrapolate it to the point of you having that system generating electricity for you for the next 25 years, 30 years, 40 years, you realize that your cost of energy production by solar is just around 2 or 3 shillings per unit. Compare that to what we are buying from maybe the grid supply, which is between 18 shillings to 25 shillings for the residential. You realize that you are basically saving up to 75% of your cost of energy when you invest in solar. And therefore, we use what we call levelized cost of energy. You invest right now, you look at the lifetime, you look at zero bills, you generate and consume every day, and the consumption of warranty of that performance will be there for the next 25 years guaranteed. Then you realize the cost of investing in solar is very, very cheap.
So then it's good investment at the end of the day.
Big time.
Now, as you sort of like get closer to winding up this conversation, what has been also your experience just working at Centec Limited in terms of the uptake of solar energy?
I want to report or communicate and affirm to you that even for the last, let's say, 5 years, Kenya is among the leading countries in Africa that has actually have taken up solar.
So you're slowly embracing this renewable energy.
And the country has actually, ranging from the industrial sector all the way to the residential area, we have been able to supply and install over, like, for example, we've served over 800 homes using solar. We have served over 7 hospitals. We have served over 15 industrial clients that are actually changing from grid utility reliance to self-independence to solar, and therefore the uptake of solar has been very, very impressive, and it's going to even do more because, as I mentioned, the cost of generating your own electricity from solar is much more cheaper. At around 3 to 4 shillings per unit. We're also looking at the cost of uptake in terms of reliability, and finally, of course, being an environmental friendly alternative, and more important, there's also financing, where if you don't have the capacity to get into it right now, we can be able to get in and supply the equipment using the expected savings that you'll be able to use away from spending from the grid. You use it up as a way of paying for your equipment ownership. For example, if you're paying 100 shillings per unit on grid supply, you put in solar, you save your electricity cost to 25. That's by you save off 75 shillings. Instead of putting that one out and probably creating a different balance sheet to acquire equipment, we'll take that 75 shillings and probably take around half of it, 30 or 40 shillings, right? Use it up to pay the equipment that we have installed for you to generate the savings and pocket the rest in terms of your savings. So when you talked about taking energy independence, it means taking your control of reducing the balance sheet of having an expense of high cost of energy, using part of the savings that you're using to acquire a new alternative energy and still saving on it at the same time.
So you can clearly confirm that at least the uptake is good enough.
I think we are moving towards the way. As I mentioned, being the leading market in Africa in terms of absorption, being the leading market in terms of entry into the electrical vehicles. You can see the discussions going on. We are moving places, and I think we are working better towards a better independence for Kenyans.
All right, lastly, Engineer, what will be your call to action, particularly to those that still feel it's quite expensive and those that wouldn't even know how to assess the quality of a good panel? What will be your call to action?
Well, as a country, even through EPRA also, there are standards that have come around to try and make sure that people who deal in solar are licensed by having V1, V2 and C1 certification. And therefore, it's important for probably the people who are likely to invest in the alternative energy through solar to vet out the contractors that are approved by the government and standardized. And two, yes, we understand the cost of electricity by solar the equipment cost part of it is a little bit high. But as I mentioned, it's not as high as it's supposed to be if you manage it up on a levelized cost of part. And therefore, yes, it's a little bit expensive, but it's a one-off investment. The moment you invest it right now, you won't have recurrent bills on it for the next 25 years. And then number three, lastly, we said there's a lot of financing subsidies that come with dealing, for example, with Centec and other market suppliers in the country, that if you invest in solar and you don't have that direct upfront cost of getting the equipment, you can be financed, and the process of financing it comes from the expected power savings that you're going to have by basically investing in this affordable but also reliable electricity, because once you have it, there will be no blackouts, you don't have to pay bills more, and basically you'll be able to have your reduced cost of power coming from the same unit.
Well said. And I mean, currently right now the world is going green energy, so why not move towards
it's a call. It's a question to basically explore, and as also mentioned, of course, information access is very, very important. As Centec, we pride ourselves in not only just giving out the solution for affordability, but before we do that, we actually educate our clients. We go through a whole process of energy audit that helps to make sure that our clients understand why they would like to invest or why they need to invest in the alternative source of energy, to what capacity and to what cost, and providing the same means of costing so that people can access this particular renewable source, alternative source of energy for their cost savings, for their expected reduced cost of production, and maybe reduced cost of energy and living at the same time.
Well said. And a good place to end this conversation. That was quite informative. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Doreen.
All right.
And asante sana for inviting us to KBC.
Asante Fia. I have been speaking to Engineer Paul Simiyu, the Director of Sentimental Energy Limited, of course, talking to us about renewable energy and what it means for you and I, given, like I said, the high cost of fuel prices and ultimately the high cost of living, and how we need to start embracing renewable energy. This is where we end this conversation, but we still have so much more continuing after this break. Time for us to talk about Universal Children Benefit Program. Those are the guests that are coming on set just after this break. Stay put.